Hey ladies and gentlemen, how are we doing today? This is Larry from Meridian. I'm going to have to avoid the temptation to look at myself on this camera here because I can't really tell what I look like so easily, my facial expressions, but I have to look at this tiny little dot over here, which, see, I just looked away from it right there. I wanted to make a series of short videos talking about different concepts in music that are useful. Simple concepts, simple ideas that when you get them, they can really open up some doors for you. And the first one I want to talk about here is this thing called Picardy third. And Picardy third is a cadence, which really means a series. A cadence is a series of chords that seems to bring finality to a certain part of music. And long, long ago, hundreds of years ago, composers began to recognize that within the scales and as diatonic music was becoming more and more prevalent, they began to find that there were certain chord progressions that would always feel like they brought ending. And the Picardy third is basically this idea where you'll go ahead and end a phrase on a major chord that's not actually in the key you're playing in. So instead of, for instance, if I were in a key where I was going to play an F minor, instead of playing the F minor, I would end it on the F. Well, I actually have a song on the first Meridian project called You Are So Precious, in which I use a similar notion. Now, I like to think of it actually as an enharmonic modulation, where I'm going to, but sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes I'm taking a scale tone that is in the key, and instead of playing the minor that would be there, I'm just going to play the major chord that's there. And there are a lot of cool songs that do this. It took me a while, actually, for me to notice that this was going on. But when I caught on to it, it really freed up some of my songwriting. It just opened a lot of doors in songwriting. So here's the chord progression from You Are So Precious. It's basically an E minor with an added D and G on top. And this is a chord that I first saw Neil Young use in the song Heart of Gold, right? I saw him use that in a live version of Heart of Gold, and but it's really an E minor chord. An E minor 7 chord is really what it is. So I'm going to go E minor 7, then D, then F, and I'm getting the inversion of the F by having the C right there. And then we're going to a C. Okay? Now, if you think about that in structure, it goes like this. Okay? When you do that, at this point, if I'm playing this chord, this E minor 7 chord can show up in several different keys. It can show up in the key of G major, it can show up in the key of D major, and it can also show up in the key of C major. So it's in all three of those related keys. But once I go from there and I go into the D chord, now I've narrowed down which keys diatonically. Okay, and I'm using a diatonic envelope to help structure my choices of harmonies and pitches. But once I went from that E minor 7 chord to this D major, now I'm either in the key of G or I'm in the key of D. Now you might say to me, well, that D chord could be in the key of A major as well. And that's true, but the E minor will not be in the key of A. And so I'm just explaining to you how I'm thinking of it, but this is basically, now right here, there is the only equivalent in those two keys would be an F sharp. I could get an F sharp diminished from G, or I could get an F sharp minor in D. And I'm free at any point in this song to consider, how I want the chord progression to change, right? That's the whole point of this. But what's a little surprising to some people when they see it for the first time is that instead of going to one of those chords that would be in a key that D is actually in, I'm just going to jump and go to the F major chord. I'm just going to jump and go to it. And that's a rather interesting jump, because all of the keys on the circle of fifths that would have the F major chord in them, that would be B flat, that would be F, and that would be C. So the F major chord is sort of, from that perspective, it's kind of over on the other side of the circle of fifths. It's not really that closely related to D, and it's a parallel jump. Now, it's not actually completely parallel, because the voicing I'm using is not a completely parallel jump. If I tried to do the parallel jump with it, we could go, and even that sounds pretty cool. You hear that kind of parallel jumping on there are plenty of songs that do that. They're doing 3 major chords in a row, a full step apart, and that, of course, does not appear in any diatonic key either. You're totally making that up. And this is what I'm talking about, is consider that in your songwriting. Okay, there's a lot of doors that can be opened if you just take a wild leap and create a parallel move that you didn't think would sound good, and then try it. You'll be surprised that it might sound good. Like, for instance, right? When it rains outside the village square, the naysayers call it a killing wind. So there's a lot of interesting harmonies that one can weave over the top of these kind of Picardy moves. And just one more before we go here. We're running 6 minutes already. In the Aeolian mode, okay, I would not get an E major. This is a similar idea, and I want to leave that hang out for you. But a lot of times in classical music, you listen to it, and you're going to hear that they have sharped the third of the fifth in that mode in order to make it feel like it resolves better, because it resolves better. And that's the idea, is that there are these little doorways, if you will, that you can step through in here, where chord progressions, chord changes at certain points that off the surface, if you're thinking too much in terms of the theory of key, you might not think that it can happen. And jazz players seem to be able to jump around at will to different keys, but a lot of us folk guitar artists and stuff, it's real easy to get caught in 1-4-5, right? And there's my Picardy into A, right? Now, that's not a cadence. I'm not finishing the song. I'm signaling that we're going to go further. But then I can go into D. So we're going 1-4-5 in C. So those kinds of subtle key changes are a lot of fun to do, and just think about that. Look around at some of your favorite songs. I think you'll be surprised to see how often they're stringing together major chords or popping major chords into places where the key you thought you were in, that chord doesn't fit in there. And to check that out, it'll probably open up some songwriting avenues for you.